Hey everyone, welcome to Tube of Tunes. I'm Luke and in today's video I'm going to be reviewing Phineas and Ferb Candace Against the Universe. So before I get started, I just wanted to let you know my history with Phineas and Ferb. I mean, I grew up watching Phineas and Ferb. I still remember when it first came out. It was during the premiere night of High School Musical 2. There was a sneak peek at a new upcoming show by Ashley Tisdale. And even though the show technically only had 4 seasons, it did air across 8 or 9 years. And so to be honest, when the show was coming to an end, I was sort of past my Disney Channel watching days. And even though I did watch a lot of the final season, I did seek it out intentionally. And even though I was convinced I had seen the finale of Phineas and Ferb, I actually went back after watching this film and realised that there was actually about 4 or 5 episodes that I hadn't actually seen. I hadn't seen the Night of the Living Pharmacist event, as well as the Last Day of Summer. That being said, even though it's been a long time since I actively watched Phineas and Ferb, I couldn't have been more excited for this film to be coming out. It was actually one of the first things announced as a Disney Plus original, and to be quite honest, it was one of the things I was most excited for. Phineas and Ferb as well also had a sort of sister show in Milo Murphy's Law, which is something that I knew about. I knew Doofenshmirts was involved, I knew there was a crossover, but it wasn't something I'd watched. I'd seen the odd episode. So I did go into watching this film pretty fresh. I'd not seen Phineas and Ferb in quite a long time. But don't confuse that for me not having high hopes for this film, because I very much did. I was very excited to return to the world of Phineas and Ferb. So let's talk a little bit about the film. At the start of this film, we see the end of a typical Phineas and Ferb adventure. Candace is starting to feel that the whole universe is against her. All she wants to do is bust her brothers, and every single time she tries, she always fails. Whilst having a heart-to-heart with Vanessa about this, the two of them end up being abducted by aliens, only for Phineas and Ferb to see them fly away. So now Phineas, Ferb and friends must do whatever it takes to save Candace. Meanwhile, of course, Dr. Doofenshmirts is trying to save his daughter, and he ends up teaming up with the kids as their goals are aligned. After a whole adventure through space, Candace eventually makes it to the alien planet, with Phineas and friends not long behind her. It turns out Candace is the chosen one, and she's going to save the race of aliens that have abducted her. From there on in, it's a cool Phineas and Ferb space adventure, and I'm not really going to say much more. I don't want to spoil any of the twists and turns. So my initial thoughts are, I actually really liked this film. I went in it just being very excited to sit down and watch Phineas and Ferb again, and watching it I did have that feeling of being taken back to my childhood and just enjoying watching the show. I love all the characters, and I'll pretty much watch them do anything. But that being said, I do think there could have been a little bit more from this film. I don't think it was perfect. I'm not entirely sure if it was quite a return to form for Phineas and Ferb. I did mention earlier that I did sort of drop off towards the end of Phineas and Ferb, and although I do think part of that was due to the fact that I wasn't watching Disney Channel anymore, because they aired season 4 over the space of 3 years. But I do remember at the time starting to feel that certain episodes was making the show feel a little bit stale. I was hoping that with the massive break they had between series 4 and this film, that it would be a bit of a return to form, back to like the golden years of Phineas and Ferb. And unfortunately, I don't think it fully delivered on that front. It was still Phineas and Ferb, and it was still fun and enjoyable, but I do think this film could have done so much more. So let me start out and tell you what I liked about this film, because I do think there is a lot to like about this film. If you do like the characters, they're all here, they're all acting exactly how you expect them to be, and they are just fun to watch interact with one another. And you do definitely get to see some interactions that you haven't seen much of in the past. For instance, anything with Doofenshmirts interacting with the kids. Those worlds don't collide very often, so it's always fun to watch. The songs. Now, I actually really liked the music in this film. I think the songs were all really good. I think most of them were really funny. The Whole Universe Is Against Me is a bop, even if they didn't actually get to see the full song in the film. They do have a gag with that song, and I do think it was really funny. I get why some people were disappointed, but if you did want to hear the full song, it is in the credits and it's on the album. The finale song was absolutely fantastic. It was the perfect way to end this film. It was like a good finale song for the series as a whole, because it featured some characters that weren't really present too much in this film, but they returned for the finale, and it felt like a final hurrah for the show. I did love Doofenshmirts and Isabella's song. adulting, truly an anthem for the millennial generation. And what's not to love about a little bit of the Lumberjacks? The one thing I will say about the songs though, as much as I enjoyed the songs, I think they're really fun to listen to and I do think they're quite funny, I do think they felt a little weirdly placed in the film. Every time a song started I was like, oh right, it's a song now. It didn't really flow into the film in the way you'd want them to in a musical, which is something that was surprising because I do think Phineas and Ferb has always been like really great at fitting the songs into the episode. They famously did almost a new song every episode and they almost always worked. They never felt forced. But here they did. It almost felt like they were doing songs because it's Phineas and Ferb and because they had to. Don't get me wrong, all of the songs themselves are good, but in the film there was something a little off about them. I do think the film as a whole was very entertaining and I do think it serves as a great thematic sort of finale to the show, which is definitely interesting. The film technically is set before the finale. It's set during the middle of summer and the finale of the show was the last day of summer. And of course in the film Candace goes through like the art of deciding that she doesn't need to bust her brothers, which is great. It works as a nice like end to that character's story. But of course it's not the end because it's not the last day of summer yet and there's more days to go. I'm not entirely sure when in the series it is placed. I'd say more towards the end. I've heard a lot of people say that it's weird that she would immediately go back to busting her brothers. I don't know, that's classic Candace. And this isn't exactly the first time we've seen Candace come to the realisation that she doesn't need to bust her brothers and she always just goes back to it the next episode. So I don't think that's like a super valid complaint, but I do think in this case they put a larger emphasis on it and it does feel like the character has changed, but I'm more than happy to buy that. Of course she just goes back to normal and trying to bust her brothers again. Also in the film the kids don't know Doofenshmirts and they do meet him in some of the final episodes of the show, so it's definitely set before that. It's not made super clear when it's set, but I also think it doesn't really matter. Phineas and Ferb was always more a very status quo show. At the end of the episode it'd always sort of go back to normal. Sure, there were certain threads that went throughout the series, but I don't think it's super important to try and place it in continuity. But like I said, even though it isn't set at the end of the show, I do think it works as like a nice thematic spiritual finale for the show. I do think every one of the main characters in this film do get their due, and as I mentioned earlier, it was a great finale song that I do think is like the perfect wrap up to a show that has been going for such a long time and has meant a lot to so many people growing up. It certainly was just a nice way to cap off the show. And of course there's just Dr. Doofenshmirtz himself. More Doofenshmirtz is always a good thing. Just put more Doofenshmirtz into my eyeballs and I will watch it. And I think he's absolutely great in this film. I love seeing his interactions with the kids. In this film he doesn't know them yet. He's got a lot of his innators. I think that's just one of those jokes that just never got old. I will always love Doofenshmirtz inventing something that's absolutely ridiculous and calling it his something innator. The chicken replacinator, I mean, that is returning from My Lord Murphy's Law and it is fantastically used here. Really inventively used here as well. I think that's always fun as well when it's a returning innator. It's not just a brand new one they invented that was just gonna fix this situation. It was, they actually looked and thought, how can we solve this with something that we've already invented in one of the shows? And on top of that, I just loved all the interactions with the kids. I love Buford and Baljeet in this film. I do like how, although they were originally just supporting characters in like one episode, they soon became part of the main cast of the show. I love their interaction with each other. Buford had a great running gag this film with a canoe. Really weird but really funny. It actually made me laugh so hard. I think one of the best things about this show is it actually made me go back and watch some of the old episodes of Phineas and Ferb, and it made me realise that I hadn't seen every episode, and I've now finished the show. I've watched the finale, cried my heart out. And I've even started watching My Lord Murphy's Law. I love the crossover episode. I love Doofenshmirtz in the second season of that show. I did watch this film when it came out a few weeks ago, and I did rewatch it again this morning, and I've got to say I actually enjoyed it a lot more the second time round. Some of the things that I think maybe annoyed me in the first viewing didn't seem as bad the second time. Yeah, I think this film actually might grow on you, so if you watched it and you weren't sure, maybe give it a rewatch because I enjoyed it a lot more the second time. Now let's talk about some of my negatives, the things I weren't quite as mad on. I do think the actual concept for the episode was a little unoriginal. It very much felt like been there, done that. I mean, particularly at least the first half of the film was the Queen of Mars episode, you know. Now I'm the Queen of Mars. And it felt like that 11-minute short but stretched out into about 30-40 minutes of the film. Of course they expand on it, it's more detailed. It's not Mars in this episode, it's a different planet, different group of aliens. And of course there is an antagonist for them to go up against and the stakes are raised because it is a film. But it did sort of feel like we've seen this before with the Phineas and Ferb characters. And it's one of those things, Phineas and Ferb was one of those shows that it had a formula that it always stuck to, but within that formula they were sort of able to do whatever they wanted, and they did such high concept episodes that in a way it's sort of harder to make something that feels like it's worth a movie that the show hasn't already done. Like, it's a lot harder for them to go bigger than the show already did, when the show was already about teenagers that could build roller coasters and could go into the space with a flick of a switch. So I do feel for them. Like, I still enjoyed the story, but it wasn't something totally new. And whilst on that same path, I do think the film had some sort of pacing issues. Like I said, it does feel like an episode we've already had, and it does feel like an episode of Phineas and Ferb stretched into movie length. You know, and I'm not saying a lot of stuff doesn't happen, but it very much just feels like padding. Sometimes the songs themselves, which are great, feels like padding out the episode to make it feature length, which itself is never a great feeling. And at the same time, even though it feels like a smaller story that's dragged out, I can't help at times thinking that it feels rushed. For instance, a lot of the times when they switched from acting to singing, which is a very weird problem to have. It feels both like they dragged the film out and rushed it at the same time. So there is definitely something off in the pacing of the film. Also, I just didn't think the film was particularly funny. Like, I enjoyed watching the film, but for me, a lot of the jokes, I do think it was a pacing thing. I think the pacing killed the jokes. There were some jokes in there which I feel like I would normally laugh at, but for some reason they just didn't work in the film. And then the last thing really was the animation. It just looked weird and off in places, mainly in the first third of the film. I've heard it was done by a different animation studio to who would normally work on the show. Maybe they just weren't used to working with the characters. In a lot of shots towards the start of the film, the characters just looked weirdly off-model. It was something that you couldn't quite put your finger on, but you just looked at them and they didn't look right. Also, the lines were really thick, which I know sounds like a really picky thing, but it's just not the style of the show. Phineas and Ferb doesn't really have the thick, cartoony lines. The designs themselves are, yes, incredibly cartoony, but they normally have really thin lines. So it's just one of those things, when you look at it, it's another thing that just makes everything look off. I could have probably forgiven it if the whole film was like that. This first third of the film, it's quite noticeable, just the fact that it's not consistent. Maybe it's something to do with the animators having to work from home during lockdown. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it just looked a little bit off. Another thing that I did find was a little off was Ferb sounded weird to me, and I did check. He has a different voice actor. It's the same person that voiced him in the Milo Murphy's Law crossover episode. I will say I didn't notice it as much in that episode, but here he did sound off. I'm not entirely sure why Thomas Sangster didn't return, and it is a shame. This guy did an alright job. I think it was just noticeable that it was a different person. It wasn't bad, it was just different. But I think with all the other things in the film that were just slightly off, it didn't help. It's one of those things, yes, there was things I wasn't perfectly mad on in this film, but I didn't want to let it, stop my enjoyment of the film. Overall, I still liked it. It was Phineas and Ferb, there were some great songs, and I just enjoyed watching the film. And like I said, I enjoyed it more the second time viewing it. The songs felt a little bit less out of place, probably just because I knew they were coming. I mean, it's more Phineas and Ferb, guys. I'm not complaining. They seem to be doing quite a lot more with the show at the minute. They've made some new chibi shorts. And they are saying that if the hype is there, if this film does well, we could see more Phineas and Ferb in the future. I mean, I do hope it's going to be a slightly better quality. I imagine if they went back to making episodes again, I'm sure they would be fine. I think it was this feature length, I don't think they work quite as well in it. Not to say that the first Phineas and Ferb movie, Across the Second Dimension, was bad. That was absolutely fantastic. And I am planning on rewatching it soon. Overall, I enjoyed this film. It just could have been better. Do I want to see more Phineas and Ferb content in the future? Yes, I do. So I hope this is them just sort of getting back into the universe. And I hope there's going to be more stuff. I think Disney Plus might be interested in doing more Phineas and Ferbs. This might not be the end of our Phineas and Ferb journey. Over the past few weeks I have enjoyed going back and revisiting the Phineas and Ferb world and rewatching a lot of the episodes of the show. If people are interested in me talking about the show or about the last film, comment down below, because I wouldn't mind talking about some more Phineas and Ferb stuff. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like. If you want to see more videos, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to be notified the next time there's a video out. I recently did review some other films. I did Superman Man of Tomorrow, the live action Mulan remake, which is also on Disney Plus, as well as I recently broke down the trailer for the upcoming Batman A Death in the Family short. Interestingly, that film also stars Vincent Martella, who's normally the voice of Phineas. He's going to be playing the Jason Todd Robin in that film, so check out that trailer if you want to hear me talk about that. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Cheers. Thanks for watching Tube of Tunes. If you want more from the channel, hit subscribe. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on, follow us on our socials. Hope you liked it. Cheers.